We're excited to introduce our next guest of today, Andreja Kovacevic Cikes. Andreja has been a practicing kinesiologist for over 22 years. Today, she will be talking about exercise and liver fitness. She will also be demonstrating some exercise movements that we can do at home. Please join me in welcoming Andreja Kovacevic Cikes.
Lifestyle and dietary changes are the most effective treatment options for fatty liver disease. So losing weight, being physically active, cutting back on sugar, and just eating a healthy diet in general are some of the ways that can help improve the symptoms of fatty liver. So, Andrea, studies have indicated that a heavy workout or strength training, like weightlifting, can improve fatty liver disease, and that we should aim for 30 to 60 minutes or more of mid to high level aerobic exercise at least 5 times a week, and mid to high level strength training at least 3 days a week. Now, this sounds easy to do if you're young and healthy, but what about for seniors or people that are limited by injuries? What is your recommendation to help them overcome the physical barriers and still be safe to exercise?
Sure, it's a great question. So the World Health Organization recommends as their guidelines for physical activity that 150 minutes of exercise be completed within the week. Now that doesn't mean that duration has to be 30 or 60 minutes at a time. You can actually do smaller bouts of 10 minutes of activity, and those smaller bouts can kind of accumulate over the week so that at the end of the week you have your 150 minutes of physical activity, which is the recommendation of achievement. And with older adults, it's very important if they have poor mobility or challenge with balance that they do maintain physical activity throughout the week to help sort of improve their functional abilities from day to day. Now, resistance training and strength training is really important because we're adding sort of strength to our bones and our body to make us more functional. So it's recommended that we target sort of the larger muscle groups of the body, like our quads and our hamstrings and our calves and our chest and shoulders and biceps and triceps and our arms, and because that makes us more functional from day to day. And that's recommended at least 2 to 3 times per week to sort of squeeze into the week. Now, physical activity itself is a broad term, and it encompasses many things like leisure activities, planned or structured exercise, or just sports, or doing some daily activities around the home. So that all encompasses physical activity. So it's sometimes daunting to just think of the word as exercise. But if we look at some of the examples of what physical activity is, it could be like a brisk walk, dancing, gardening, hiking, swimming, playing tennis. So those all sort of count towards physical activity. Things like with transportation, instead of driving, maybe you're cycling or walking. If you're still in the workforce, maybe you have a physically demanding job, so that would sort of count as physical activity. And then around the household, you have chores all the time. Maybe you're mowing the lawn, things like that, or playing in the park with your grandkids or your kids, playing some sports. So those all sort of count towards that physical activity goal of 150 minutes. Now, it's important with older adults, it's sometimes hard to gauge how hard am I working, or when do I get into that moderate intensity zone. And what's really helpful as a tool is to use the rate of perceived exertion scale. And that's a scale that goes from 1 to 10. And so basically it looks at your perceived ability of how much you're exerting on effort and work. And 1 stands for very light activity, so that would mean maybe like sitting and watching TV. As a perceived exertion. And then if you climb up the scale from 4 to 6, that looks at more of a moderate activity level. So that means that it's hard to have a short, you're having a short conversation, you're breathing a little heavier, but it's still manageable, if that makes sense. So 4 is kind of a comfortable level, 5 is some discomfort, and then 6 is a little bit more discomfort, but you're still managing okay. Now, level 10 is sort of that max amount of effort, and that's where you really can't sustain it. So we want to look at staying within that 4 to 6 zone.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
When I take the stairs at work, I feel that I'm at a 4 for sure.
There you go.
This is a question from the audience. I am a young, healthy person who can't run anymore because of knee problems. What is the most effective alternative way to burn fat in this situation?
Sure. So safe and effective exercise that's considered aerobic, but low stress to the knees are things like cycling, walking, Nordic walking, sort of urban poling, as you might have seen people sort of walk around the city with those poles, and swimming. So those are definitely considered to be more low impact to the lower extremities. And outdoor exercises such as cycling are really good to do. And what happens with an outdoor cycling versus an indoor is that you've got some wind resistance, you've got some difference in terrain, so that makes it a more challenging way to sort of do some physical activity. So the Nordic walking with the activator poles, or urban poling as people might sort of term it, it engages the lower body. It engages your core. It brings the upper body into sort of activity as well, which increases the energy output when you're actually doing the activity. And then most importantly, it offloads the joints below the hips. So hips and knees and ankles are offloaded, so it's a reduced strain to the joints. So it's very oftentimes that we can look at some of the community centers as well and maybe take a class, do a lower impact aerobic class or a Zumba class. And so there are different variations of lower intensity exercise that still sort of make you work a little bit harder.
Okay, thank you. The next question is it safe for older adults who are 65 or above to exercise? How much exercise should they do, and what are some safety tips?
Sure.
To add on to the first question.
Yeah. So the first question is it safe? And yes, absolutely, it's safe to do so. It's very important to exercise and sort of keep moving, especially as we get older. So just like we spoke at the beginning of our talk, the World Health Organization recommends the 150 minutes. But we can sort of break that up in the week, right? It can be in smaller chunks, so it doesn't seem so daunting for me to sort of get there. But some of the safety important tips are choose an exercise or activity that you can stick to. There's no point in doing something that doesn't make you feel good, is really hard to do, and then it's unmotivating to do it. You want to pick activities you enjoy. Maybe a favorite sport, something you did in the past that you were really good at, or you just really had a good time doing. The best exercise is often the one that gets done. We sometimes have our best of intentions, but let's pick the one that gets done and let's be consistent with that. And you want to be as physically active as your abilities allow. So, if someone has more challenges with balance or strength, then we need to appropriately choose an activity that sort of suits their abilities to make them more successful at doing it. And inactive people should always start slow. Start with small amounts of physical activity, and then work towards increasing the duration, the intensity, and the frequency with which they're doing things over time. So it's important with recommendations that we can adjust those recommendations to suit the person. It's very important to individualize things and based on their capacity and their specific needs. So I say the key is let's reduce our sedentary time. Let's reduce the amount of time we spend sitting.
So the next question, also from a member of the public. I'm a 65-year-old and I go to the gym 4 to 5 times a week. Will I be able to build some muscle?
And the answer is yes. And good for you for going to the gym 4 to 5 times a week. So the amount of weight that you're going to lift and the number of repetitions that you do, it depends on many factors. So someone's current fitness level, their age, and what their goals are. So if we're looking to sort of build some strength and sort of build some muscle mass, then typically we'll look at lower numbers of repetitions and heavier weights to be lifting. And that often looks like either 8 to 12 repetitions and 2 to 3 sort of sets per exercise. And so the key is progression of exercise with strengthening. You don't want to plateau because that's not going to build strength. You want to sort of continuously try to progress so that the muscle has an opportunity to build and become stronger. And with that stronger muscle, you have greater lean body mass as well. And a lean muscle mass has a greater efficiency at burning calories. So that's an important note. And it's important to think that, we can do exercise in the gym, but we can also do exercise in the home. And so we don't always need fancy equipment like free weights or machines. We can certainly modify things at home to make them even a weighted exercise with some of the things we have around our house. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
My mother-in-law is afraid of falling. She's 75 years old and has balance issues. Should she avoid exercise, and what are her options?
And I'm going to say absolutely no to the avoiding exercise, because I think it's really important for everyone, no matter what your age is to keep moving. And so we really want to match the abilities with the person. So if there are things that are more concerned with balance, maybe a risk of falling, or just low muscle strength, then we're just going to modify things, but still be active. With older adults, we often have sort of people with poor mobility, or they have sort of balance and sort of fear of movement. And so that's something we really have to overcome. But if we show them activities and movements that are within their capacity and capability, then it's motivating that they can perform something and be successful at it. And once again, like the poles, such as the sort of the Nordic walking, which I'll demonstrate sort of later on in our talk, are really great because they have an opportunity to increase and improve someone's balance capacity. You can be more confident when you're walking with them. It really engages the lower body, the arms, and the core at the same time. So I think it builds on that sort of motivation and confidence to sort of maintain movement. And it gives you sort of a bilateral support, like each arm has a bit of stability, so it gives you some confidence when you're performing those activities. And certainly other options are maybe riding a stationary bike, if they're not going to be good at riding outside because it's a stable position, or some seated exercises.
Okay, great, thank you. Now the next question, I believe you answered a little bit, but maybe if you can give us some pearls. How do I get started, and how do I stay motivated?
Sure, that's one of the bigger questions I think that everyone always asks. And you really got to start small with physical activity and just gradually increase your duration and your time and your frequency, because it's really about creating some consistency, and it becomes a habit. So we're all about creating new habits in our world and sort of creating those life changes that are going to encourage a better, healthy life for us down the road. And it can be as little as 10 minutes, right? You could sort of pick an activity and do 10 minutes, and then at the end of the week, you've tallied all those 10 minutes, and then it equates to 150 minutes in total. So how to stay motivated? I often find that exercising with a friend or a family member, like a spouse or your kids, are really motivating to get everybody outside. Using a fitness tracker to sort of log your activities and sort of track what you're doing within the week can be very motivating. Marking activities on your calendar, there's like a visible reminder for you that you've got to do something today, and it sort of holds you accountable. Scheduling your time, making an appointment with yourself. I think oftentimes it's hard because if I don't see it and I'm not reminded, it's not going to get done. And at the end of the day, you just might be too tired to do it. So really making that commitment to yourself and to hold yourself accountable, setting yourself with an appointment. Exercise really works when it's consistent from a health perspective. Maybe get a dog. That's certainly going to force you to get outside and walk every day, which is a great way to get some physical activity in. Maybe join a community walking group. It's a great social aspect, if you're looking to get other motivation by having others around you, and really choose something you enjoy. You really have to like what you're doing to want to continue to do it again. And maybe you're going to consider taking up your favorite sport or an activity you did in the past, like playing tennis or badminton. And I often find that rewarding yourself is an important piece to sort of building that new routine, making it a habit. It's okay to create a reward system, because maybe that's going to make you do it again the next day and the next day and the next day until it becomes a routine. So physical activity is really doing anything you can to get moving. It doesn't have to be like that exercise you see someone doing in the gym. It can really be a sort of collection of a lot of activities. But that's a little bit more physically demanding to do. So move your body regularly. That's my biggest recommendation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So for people who enjoy less intense forms of exercise, such as yoga, Is it as effective as other forms that you've mentioned? Can it still burn fat, and can it still cause weight loss?
Sure, great question. So exercises such as yoga or things like Tai Chi are very helpful in reducing stress. They also increase mobility and flexibility. They increase our body's stability and certainly improve our balance. And those are really great qualities for a lot of older adults to sort of incorporate into their routine. We also look at those activities as held poses. So those are great ways to improve your core. And that's a really important factor for improving some strength. And when you increase muscle tone, it leads to an increase in lean body mass. And the more lean body mass you have, the more efficient that muscle is at burning calories. So at the end of the day, you're just a more efficient body, if that makes sense. So these types of activities also significantly lower your cortisol levels, which is your stress hormone in the body. And also Tai Chi is also recommended for people to reduce their risk of falls. So really great activities to include.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, the last question is also similar. So you've given a bit of advice on this before, but how can you incorporate exercise into a daily routine? I know you've mentioned having a calendar system, scheduling it in, but any other ways or things we can do on a daily basis?
Yeah, absolutely. Physical activity can look like many things. It doesn't have to fit in a box, right? You could be running errands, and that's your physical activity. You could be completing your chores, gardening, mowing the lawn. So there's a lot of ways to sort of get physical activity into your day. Maybe instead of driving, you're going to walk or cycle for your transportation to get to appointments. Or you're going to park your car a little further away, so you've got to walk a block or two before you get there. If you're still in the workforce, then maybe walk during your lunch hour, or maybe schedule a walk before or after work, maybe with a colleague or something to sort of get out there. And I also encourage that you sort of get your family to take part in physical activity. Maybe you go for a bike ride in the neighborhood together, or go for a walk or a hike. Get off the bus one stop early so that it sort of forces you to sort of walk a little bit further each way. Take the stairs instead of the elevator. That's the classic one. And maybe do a dance at home. Put your favorite music on and do some dancing around the house, or even sign up to one of your local community center dance groups and sort of get that more social aspect that you might have enjoyed as well. Really the key is that you want to live a lifestyle that's filled up with more movement. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for answering the questions. Now, I've noticed that you brought some items here today.
I brought some toys.
Do you mind demonstrating for us?
Sure.
Maybe a couple of things we can do around the house?
So I brought with me, it's a medicine ball. So this is a weighted ball. Now, not everybody has one of these at home, but I would recommend that even if you were to get your laundry detergent container, because that does have some weight to it, that would be a simple enough way to sort of add some load to your movement. So I've selected an exercise called sit to stand. And this exercise is a very functional exercise. It's something we do probably every day. And it's important to make sure that our body is strong and able to do these kind of things as we sort of get older. So I'm going to use the chair that I'm sitting in. I'm going to hold this weighted ball kind of in front of me like a goblet. And I know that the chair is behind me, so I'm going to basically just sort of squat down, tap my butt to the chair, and then sort of come back up. So I could do this maybe 10 every hour. Exercise doesn't have to be very forced. It could be something that I just do within the hour repetitiously. And at the end of the day, maybe I'm breathing a little heavier, right? And so I'm on that sort of 4 to 6 perceived exertion scale when I do that. Okay? Now maybe somebody has more of a balance challenge and they don't need a weighted ball. I could certainly use the chair to do squats and hold on to the chair for some bilateral balance. And again, repeat that for 10 repetitions or so. And another way, if we wanted to consider using our upper body, we could use the chair in our home. Maybe it's a table or a dining room table or the counter in the kitchen, and I could do some push-ups. Now these are larger muscle groups working, but very functional exercises. So this is my demonstration of a push-up, which is important to increase the upper body strength, especially we know that typically women have weaker strength in their upper bodies than men. And then I brought these really cool sort of walking poles. These are called urban walking poles, the activator poles. And they're a really great way to engage the core, because sometimes when we look at just walking, you know, people walk and then they walk sort of with a shuffle or their head forward, and that doesn't really engage the upper body. When we sort of think of walking, we think of our legs. But by using the activator poles, they've got this nice ergonomic grip design. I get to push down on the handles to kind of turn on my core. And it mimics the gait of walking, right? And it really creates a balanced support. And if somebody has balance challenges, then they're way more stable and they're engaging their core as they walk with the poles.
Great.
Yeah, and they're very lightweight, very durable. They are able to withstand about 200 pounds per pole. And so it's typically recommended that a 250-pound person could utilize these poles very safely and walk within the community. And it certainly gets your heart rate up a little faster because you're working lower body, core, and upper body all together. And then in addition to that, we're offloading the joints below the waist. So hips and knees are more offloaded for stress, if that makes sense. So it's a very safe way to move.
So then for if you have knee injuries, I presume this would be a good way to...
Yeah, so the poles are great for anyone who's had knee or hip replacements, people with multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, those with stroke, anyone with chronic health conditions or injuries. So it's very important for even that population, for everybody to stay moving. And we need to figure out a way that everybody can do that in a safe way.
Absolutely.
Right? And then for the upper body, we could get you to do some shoulder elevations. This is great for sort of movement through the shoulder and the upper body, range of motion. Maybe I'm going to do a chest press here with my poles, or I'm going to do an overhead shoulder press. And these are really simple things that I could do in my living room watching TV. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And then one last thing I'm going to show you is the marching. And so again, with balance and using our body, we could get you to do like a marching activity with your poles. And if you didn't have your poles, then you could go back to your chair, and I could use a chair at home to do my marching, or maybe I'm doing it sort of at the table or at the countertop in the kitchen and working on increasing my physical activity that way. Maybe I do 2 minutes of marching every hour. Maybe that's my way over an accumulation of time that I can get my 150 minutes in at the end of the week. So those are just some examples of some of the ways we can get more physically active. But I certainly recommend that you consult a physician or a rehab specialist just to ensure that the appropriate level of activity is right for you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I
Thank you for
definitely
having
learned a
me.
lot. Motivated to go home and start.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.